We're in the restoration shop area for the Museum of Yesterday right now. We actually have a radio on the bench that we've been working on. If you notice here, we have all old test equipment. We have authentic test equipment that would have been around in the 1930s and 40s, because actually that's the most effective way to restore an antique radio. These instruments were made to give the serviceman efficiency back in the old days, and when you're working on an old radio, it's an efficient way to work on them. This is a radio made by a company called Howard Radio, and it's a significant radio because there were a number of brands of radios in the 1930s that had gotten together. Grigsby Grunow, which was a famous manufacturer in the 20s, was having financial troubles when the Depression started, and they were about to go out of business. One of their salesmen, in fact, one of their best salesmen, a guy by the name of Bill Halligan, decided he was going to go into business and manufacture a radio that could be used by the government services like safety, police departments, fire departments, and also ham radio operators. It was going to be a Cadillac of a shortwave radio. Well, his company he called Hallicrafters Company, and it's a name everybody probably recognizes if you've been around radios for any length of time. Hallicrafters, when they first started, did not have a license from RCA. At the time, you couldn't manufacture radios in the United States if you didn't have a license from RCA, because RCA controlled the vacuum tube technology that belonged to Lee DeForest. So Hallicrafters bought a company called Echophone. Echophone was a manufacturer of cheap residential house-type radios, but they didn't have the manufacturing facilities to actually make any radios on any kind of a large scale. It was a small production company. So Hallicrafters, after acquiring Echophone, needed a large manufacturing facility. He made a contract with another company that was manufacturing domestic radios called Howard Radio Company. And the early Hallicrafter radios were actually made by Howard, and you can see the similarity on these if you look at for example, a Hallicrafters, one of their early shortwave radios, like the Sky Buddy or the Sky Champion. It looks exactly identical, knobs and tubes and switches and everything, to a Howard radio. This is a Howard Model 437, which was sort of the link between the Hallicrafters, the Echophone, and the Howard manufacturing at the time. The Echophone EC1 and EC3 series was famous because these were radios that were given to the GIs during World War II so that they'd have contact with the American programs back home over the GI, the Armed Forces Radio Service. So you see a lot of advertising for Echophone EC3 and EC1 in some of the old magazines from during the war, because that was the only thing that was being made by Hallicrafter as a receiving radio. The rest of their stuff was being made for military use, like the HT1 transmitter and some of the other devices that they sold to the military. So anyway, this Howard radio, when we got it, was we needed to restore it. The cabinet was in terrible condition, which you can see a picture of. We were lucky because years ago, the wrinkle paint that was used on a lot of the old metal cabinet radios was removed from the market because they discovered that they had a carcinogenic compound in it. Well, just recently, someone found out that they could manufacture wrinkle paint without that ingredient, so we were fortunate that we could get a can here of wrinkle paint. This is a modern can available, and if you go on our website, Museum of Yesterday, there's a link on there for the company that manufactures it. Because of that, we were able to take that damaged cabinet that you saw in the first picture, and this is what it looks like now after we restored it. Now the decals are missing. There's also a link on our page to a company that manufactures decals. We're waiting on the decals to come right now. It's custom decals for this radio, look just like the original manufacturer's decals. So we'll be able to finish that cabinet where it looks identical to an original radio. The power cord on this radio had to be replaced. As you saw in the picture, there was a rotten line cord on it that you definitely would not have wanted to plug in into a wall socket. So we have a new cord. We generally, when we put a new cord on a radio, if it's at all possible, we put a grounded 3-prong cord. This radio could theoretically be used with a ham radio setup, and it would be best to have a ground on that because you don't want to have any stray RF or anything getting in the radio.
But I'll bet you the original cord did not have
the original cord was a 2-wire cord with an unpolarized plug. Now this radio has a power transformer in it, so you don't have to worry about chassis shocks on it as long as you verify that the transformer's working. Some of the older radios you have to be careful because they didn't have a power transformer, and you could get a shock off the chassis depending on which way you plugged them in the wall. The chassis could become hot.
Yeah, they would actually knowingly make it so it could be a hot chassis.
Yeah, exactly. They were called hot chassis radios. In the case when you're working on a radio like that, use an isolation transformer. This is a very fancy one, but they come in all different sizes and price ranges. But what it does, it isolates the chassis. What I generally do on a metal chassis is just take some typical furniture polish lemon oil. This is just plain old lemon oil that you buy in the hardware store. Take a small brush and paint the metal chassis with it. If there's any tendency for the chassis to rust or anything, this will usually arrest the rust. Don't get the lemon oil on the tubes because it can't hurt anything, but on the other hand, you're going to see some smoke when the tubes get hot for the first time. So make sure that you stay away from the tubes. What I also do is I usually take the tubes out and clean them with a wet rag or something so that you can see them, the dust is off of them. Getting the dust off of them makes them get rid of the heat a lot easier too.
And of course, don't get this on the dial cord.
Absolutely, that's very important. The string dial cords on this will make them slip, so you never want to get it anywhere near that. The other thing is that in this radio, believe it or not, this radio will work just as it is. I mean, we got it in the shop here. We changed the line cord on it and tested it with a special device where we can ramp the voltage up, and the radio plays with all the original parts. For safety's sake, we're going to change the filter capacitor. Remember, we talked about the filter capacitors in the power supply. Well, this is the filter capacitor. We have a replacement for this capacitor on the way to us right now to replace this one. A company called Antique Radio Supply in Tempe, Arizona still sells these capacitors, so it's possible to still get them. The
new ones?
The brand new ones, not remanufactured. And the other thing we did on this is that radio originally had dial lamps, which look like this. This is a little, what they call a number 47 dial lamp. We go ahead and we replace bayonet base, right? We go ahead and we replace those with LEDs. You'll find a company on our website called, it's a hobby company. I can't remember the name of it right offhand, but it's on our website on the service page. They manufacture LEDs. These are really LEDs made for model train enthusiasts, but they work perfectly fine in a radio. So we've replaced the dial lamps with LEDs. These will never burn out, and they also draw much less current than the original dial lamps did.
6-volt?
6-volt dial lamps, right.
Talk to us about the tuning capacitor here. It's got 3 gangs to it.
Right. This is what they call a variable capacitor. As you tune it, the plates move in and out. The stationary plates, there's moving plates. They move in and out of each other and change the capacitance, which is how the radio is tuned. One section on this kit, this is a 3-section or 3-gang, as it's called, capacitor. One of the first section is the RF section. It tunes the RF amplifier, which is what amplifies the initial signal coming into the radio off the antenna. The second section is is tuning the first RF converter stage, which is the stage that mixes the incoming RF signal, the incoming radio signal, with the local oscillator to produce that 455 kilocycle mixed signal that we talked about before. And then the third section is controlling the frequency of the local oscillator, which is the oscillator that beats against that signal to provide the 455 kilohertz signal. And
as you tune a station, these are all working together.
Yeah.
You can tune them individually, I would guess, through these mica.
Yeah, we have these are little trimmer capacitors, and what they do is it's important that the impedance or the electrical characteristics of these coils exactly match the frequency that they're trying to tune. So in addition to tuning them with the capacitor, we have a fine adjustment on them, which is these little padders, and that's part of the alignment of the radio, is you have to go through and tune these padders. Now, you had a set of alignment tools you wanted to show?
Yeah, here's a typical set of alignment tools. Lots of because every radio used different things. Some were just a screwdriver slot. Some of these coils in cans, they do that to minimize hum, and some of those would use bizarre, like a hex. So these are all plastic, so they don't induce any hum into the.
Yeah, you can actually change
while you're working.
change the frequency of the transformer by putting a metal screwdriver on.
Right.
So when you tune it, you have to use something that has no metal. And that's what the reason for those. Okay. The radio is operating right now out of the case. This is all original parts as far as we know, and nothing done to it other than changing the pilot lamps and the line cord.
Yeah, well, that's different. I usually have to drill those stupid bolts and put the plate in. And
yeah, the speakers up here in the
sometimes they're made
top of the case.
Yeah, this radio does have an electrodynamic speaker too, which is different from the modern day speakers that have a permanent magnet. The coil in the speaker that forms the electromagnet is actually part of the filtering circuit in the power supply. It's designed to resonate with the two filter capacitors in such a way that it filters out any 60 or 120 cycle hum from the radio, so that all you get is pure DC coming out of it.
A lot of old jukeboxes use that same circuitry in their amplifier.
Yeah, most radios before the end of World War II were using those. The permanent magnet speakers went into use in military radios during the 40s. Of course, no residential or home consumption radios were made during World War II. Everything was military radios. So there's a lot of developments that came out of World War II that were applied to home radios after World War II, including the advent of television. Television came out of World War II. Even though it was in development before that, the first actually working television was part of World War II's technology. The Howard Radio Company, the company that made this radio for Hallicrafter, or made it along with Hallicrafter, went out of business in 1947. The reason was that after World War II, there was a bunch of new technology that came out, including miniature electron tubes, the little small glass tubes that had no big base on them. And then they went to transistors after that. Howard didn't believe that they needed to go to the modern technology. They decided they were going to continue to make radios with 8-pin octal tubes and old, conventional technology that had been around before the war. And of course, it cost them their existence. They went out of business in 1947 because people just weren't buying their radios anymore, despite them actually making a reasonably good quality radio. So it was sad, but there was a lot of companies that went out of business along those lines. Either some companies built radios too well that they never failed, like Atwater Kent. Atwater Kent built a radio that was so indestructible that it never failed. Consequently, they never sold any replacement radios. And the same thing went for a lot of the companies that did these kind of radios, that they didn't want to change their technology. So, that's pretty much it. You'll find that some of the post-World War II radios are worth more money on the collector's market than some of the very early 1920 rare sets. There was a particular Bendix radio that was made after World War II that does not, looking at it, you'd never believe what it was worth, but they're actually worth more than, say, an Atwater Kent 1920 breadboard, for the simple reason that a lot of people after the war bought them because they were available right away, and so you have a bunch of baby boomers that was their first radio, and so they're going around now looking for a replacement to replace grandma's radio or the radio they had in their nursery when they were kids or something, and consequently the prices of these radios have just skyrocketed. So,
well, and the other thing with not adopting more modern circuits like miniature tubes and all, those enabled good radios, to be much smaller and lighter than what had come before.
That's true, yeah.
And that was a big selling feature.
Well, in the 1950s, there was no more, by the end of the 1950s, all production radio, as far as programs on the radio, where there were actors and music and stuff, had gone away. And radio became nothing but disc jockeys and news and things like that. So people wanted radios that they could carry to the beach with them, take on picnics. They wanted radios in their cars and radios they could walk around on the street with them. And that was, that wasn't possible with these tube radios. It would have been too heavy to put batteries in them. So you your transistor radio just replaced these things, and they just went away
Yeah.
in time.
Yeah, yeah. The transistor radio just really sucked up the market for
Absolutely.
AM radios, and then they were able to do a decent FM transistor radio.
Yeah.
And
It's a progression of development. But that's pretty much what our collection of radios looks like, and we're glad that you could come and stop in this morning and see this. Our collection will be, it's available online at www.museumofyesterday.org. The entire collection's on there, including the railroad equipment and the radios, the pipe organ, and everything. So please tune in and check our website out, and there's a lot of good information on there, a lot of manuals. If you need a manual to repair an old radio, a schematic diagram, you'll generally find those. If we have one of the radios, we have the schematic to go with it. So you can look on the site and get a lot of good information if you need it.
well, and be looking for our next episode. We'll dive into something else equally as interesting. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching.